Welcome to another episode of In the Library of Graphic Literature with your happy host, Wallace Ryan. Yay! Unfortunately, the wonderful Luna is off to work today, but I figure I'm going to do actually a little bit of a fill-in episode, but the start of actually a little feature of mine that will be the theme of the next few fill-in episodes. And these are the episodes that I call my comic book DNA. Woo! DNA. Anyway, you're saying to yourself, what the heck is Wallace talking about? Comic book DNA. Well, comic book DNA, to me, are the comics that I've read throughout my lifetime that basically have woven the very essence of my character, both on a personal level, on an artistic level, and on a bit of a comic collecting level, I guess, in some ways, and on a deep art level. These were the books that basically showed me the way from a very early age. And you know, some of the comics I'll be talking about was quite by accident. They were comics that were provided to me. Well, especially the this episode, because this episode will cover my early life as a kid and the comics that started my love affair with comics. So, without further ado, we'll jump right into it. And saying that, we're going to jump right back to, I think it's the 1964. It seems like a fierce jump back. And we're going to start out my comic book DNA with this baby. Oh, hang on a second there. With this baby here. This is The Atom. By the amazing Gil Kane. So, as a kid, I was a DC kid. I guess maybe because... I don't know, I think it was because my aunt and uncle collected them for their kids, and we ended up with the leftovers and that. But I was a huge fan of this artist who I didn't know at the time, but who I would come to recognize later as Gil Kane. There was just something about the artwork as a child, it just attracted me to it. Now, at the time when I first started reading these comics, I actually could not read. Yes, you heard me. I could not read at the age of 3. Bit of a scandal, I know, but that's the way it was. But within about a year or two, I was able to read and write just from reading comics. Well, I didn't have anyone teach me how to... well, I had my older brothers and all that who would help me with words and stuff like that. But once I discovered the alphabet and how that was the code to these mysterious symbols that were littered throughout the comics, I began to put it together, and then next thing I was reading them. And along with The Atom, too, was one of my other favorite ones, and funny enough, also from Gil Kane also. I don't know if someone was a Gil Kane fan or whatever, but, and this is this one I can actually remember very vaguely as a child reading. Now, of course, I read this later on when this was in 100-page or somewhere along the way. But there are some covers that I actually do recall from when I was a kid, and some I do not. This one I do. This is actually one of my favorite Gil Kane covers too. But once again, there was something about Green Lantern that I was attracted by. That cool costume of his. Very cool design even back then. And this was actually where I first started drawing comics. I was 3 years old. 4 years old, I started drawing comics. Started selling them to my dad. So he'd come home, I'd sell him the comic, whatever I worked on that day, for 5 cents, or 10, I think it was 5 or 10 cents. And I think it was 10 cents. Anyway, that that seemed to be pretty good, and I was making a nice bit of coin there. But then one day he came back from work, and I'd upped the price to 25 cents. But he didn't buy my comic. He said it was too much. So that was the first time I learned an economic lesson in my life that I can recall. Now, along with DC, I wasn't a big Marvel fan. I was aware of them. I mean, Spider-Man was on the TV and all that, and I actually liked the cartoon, yet funny enough didn't buy the comics. And for some reason as a kid I wasn't a big fan of Jack Kirby's style. To me, I still didn't understand it yet. Wait till one of the next episodes when you see the flourishing of me as an artist connoisseur, when I finally figured out what Kirby was all about. But anyway, so it was more of a DC person. But along with that, I also did read comics from other companies, and most especially, actually, let me find the, oh yeah, most especially, Magnus Robot Fighter. There was just something cool about the art, and I did like some of the other comics from Gold Key at the time. This is by the amazing Russ Manning. Absolutely stunning artwork, with apparently Mike Royer on some of the inks for this. So very early Royer. This is what led to him working with Kirby years later. But I just love the artwork, the figures, everything about it was absolutely 100% cool. I can see how someone, say, like for instance, Dave Cockrum was influenced by this guy. But yes, if you want to check out some cool 60s independent art, check out anything from Gold Key, because along from Gold Key also came Turok, Son of Stone, and this was this great little. I mean, this is decades ahead of Jurassic Park, but in this case, it's two Native American Indians who somehow wander into like a lost valley, so to speak, and they, of course, have to deal with all sorts of dinosaurs and stuff like that. Beautifully drawn. I can't remember exactly who drew this, but this along Magnus Robot Fighter, and it's funny because years later when they came back with Valiant, I was over the moon with joy. Let's see here. Table of contents really doesn't say much in terms of artists here. Oh, Alberto Giolitti. Written by Paul S. Newman, one of the most prolific comic book writers of them all. But there was just something about Turok, Son of Stone. I think maybe it was those cool Gold Key covers. And for some reason I like the fact that the covers were not only on the cover, but they reproduced them on the back then without all the trade address, the trade dress. But there was just something very, very cool about Turok. This, like I say, it was sort of neat to stick my toes in other company waters, which included at the time Carlton Comics. Not as much for the Question as more for the Blue Beetle. For some reason, I really latched onto this guy. Loved his stuff to death. And actually, come to think of it, I should also have a look. Oh, from around the same time. Let's. I guess this was possibly later. Anyway, I was a huge fan of Steve Ditko, and I recognized him from Spider-Man. He was one of the first artists that I ever was able to recognize and say, hey, this is Steve Ditko. I seen his stuff on Spider-Man or whatever. Especially like with this one here, and this I can definitely remember reading. And this was from Yeah, 68. Actually, that's a bit later. We'll put that more to the bottom of the pile there. Okay. Anyway, so let's wander back to DC because, of course, with DC, like I say, I was primarily a DC artist, and of all the DC comics that my aunt and uncle used to bring down to the comic, the one that I really focused on as I got older and just seemed to be spellbound by was, of course, the Legion of Superheroes. Da-na-na-na-na-na. To me, here was not just one hero, not just two heroes, but a legion of them. Piles and piles of them. And the one that influenced me most, and I had this as a kid, and I hate to say this, when I was a kid, I used to, when I finished reading the comics a lot of times, I would cut them up, and I'd have them like little action figures that I'd play with on the table and have them fighting each other, and eventually they get crumpled and thrown out. And among the ones of this that I did that to was the classic, what is it, Adventure Comics 350, is it 353? Yeah, which includes the Doomed Legionnaire. Basically, this is one of the very early someone in this comic will die type of comics. So at the time, it was pretty impressive to me. It was just like, oh my God, they're actually going to kill off one of their characters. In the end, of course, turned out to be poor old Pharaoh lad, who was he was an interesting character, but you know, he was no Timberwolf or Ultra Boy or any of the other ones. But meanwhile, a lot of cool heroes in the Legion. Some of the villains were kind of cool too. The Fatal Five, for instance, I thought were really cool. So, Legion of Superheroes, that really got me into comics. And it's funny because when I leave comics for a little bit in the late 60s, early 70s for a year or so, it's the Legion that brings me back from the brink. Da-da-da-da-da. Anyway, now, remember what I said earlier about that I was mainly a DC person during the 60s when I was a kid and all that. That was except for some reason for Captain Marvel. For some reason, and I can remember buying this comic when I first seen it on the stands. I didn't know at the time that this was Gene Colan, a comic book artist that I would grow to love, admire, and collect to as much as I could possibly collect. But yeah, there was something about it, and then of course the first issue. To me, it was something really cool. I like the fact that he was like a captain as part of a whole force of people, and they all had these cool uniforms with different planets on them, stuff like that. And the artwork, especially most especially the Colan artwork, kind of went downhill after he left, and I sort of wandered away. And it's funny too because he would also come into view when I returned to comics there after a year or so off later on. And of course, there was The Creeper, and I still remember to this day buying that issue of Showcase. This one, and just like with the Blue Beetle and all that, I of course recognized the Steve Ditko guy, which is like, oh my God, this is the same guy who did Blue Beetle, and most of all, I recognized him as the artist who did Spider-Man, and I always loved Ditko. I mean, look at the tension even in the background faces. It's just like everyone's about to lose their minds. Anyway, loved the Creeper. As a matter of fact, I can even remember thinking that, wow, this. And there was the first issue which I also had. Look at that, man. I mean, come on, that's a classic. But he was also such an unusual hero. Here was some dude with what appeared to be yellow skin, some kind of furry red stuff hanging off him, and he was just jumping around laughing, and he was doing those weird things with his fingers, Ditko-esque things with his fingers. But I can even remember at the time thinking, wow, this creeper guy is really cool. Much cooler than that Spider-Man guy, you know. Probably way outlast him and all that. And so we all know what happened with that and why I was so wrong. Now, rounding out this episode of my comic book DNA is the other step I took into Marvel as a kid. And it was Daredevil. For some reason, I like Daredevil. And this one, I can remember not only from the origin of Marvel Comics, but I can remember having this one as a kid and a couple around this. And there was something too about the box artwork that I liked. I always liked the box artwork with all the Marvel Comics. But this, once again, when I moved to this, is once again Gene Colan. Funny enough, we're starting to see some themes here, which will come out in some of the later episodes. But he was, it's just something about him. I guess the action, everything about him. I wasn't attracted to him per se as an artist per se, but he made the comic just so interesting, so action-packed. I mean, look at this. He really put Daredevil in motion. I've never quite seen anyone quite like him. He did a few later on episodes in the 70s too, which were kind of cool. But to me, Gene Colan's best days on the Daredevil was the early days. Like this. Check out this. This is where, for a short while, they split Daredevil into two words. That logo didn't last long, as we can see here. It was 1, 2, 3, 4 4 issues that lasted. Then they went back to the normal one, and then they switched to the 70s one. And there's the classic. Loved it. But there was something about Daredevil, I don't know what it was. It was cinematic. It was fabulous. To me, they were I guess I was a big Batman fan, and I guess to me Daredevil had Batman-esque qualities to him, except for the being blind and the radar sense and all the sort of superpowers he had. He seemed, outside his radar sense, in that he was essentially just a normal human being who was with great athleticism, kind of like Batman, I guess. Anyway, that's part one of my comic book DNA. The next episode, which might be next week, might be the week after, we'll pick up in the late 60s and we'll go into the early 70s. I'm going to do this, like I say, slowly. I took as many books as I could, and I will for each episode. I'll have basically some pictures to show you of what led me down the path to become an artist myself, and to become such a lover and promoter of the world's greatest comic arts form, comic books. Yay! I mean, we all know it. Anyway, that being said, we will be doing a show because I did get some new comics. We may even do it this week if I can if I could tie Luna down for a second. She's been very busy lately, but hopefully we will get a show out. And I know you all miss her when she's not here. I actually kind of miss her when she's not here, because it's just like I'm used to having company. That being said, we'll see you next week. Thanks for having me over, and keep on reading them comics. Yay! Bye!